afternoon, bookworms. So happy to see you all here. It is Monday and your Chattering Magpie is so ready for a new week and of course bookworm pre-pub in about 2 hours. Yes, 2 hours. So happy Mind Day to those who observe Monday rejoicing. So today I am going to continue reading Jane Eyre. This is the 17th session, you guys. It is rather a long book, but no worries, we're more than halfway through. We're like 70% done with the book. So if you think that so far you've seen, this is not a romance book. It has some romance, but it's all about our girl growing up and finding herself and, discovering, a bildungsroman or whatever they call it. Coming of age story. So, we still have a little bit of ways to go with the book, and I hope you've been enjoying it thus far. I have definitely been loving sharing this with you and reading your comments and just rediscovering or discovering some stuff that I had totally forgotten from when I first read it. And so, yeah, happy to see you here. And let's see. I'm going to say hello to Early Gang, who here is Akihana. Hello, says hi Magpie and Early Gang. Says it's 3 a.m. for Philippines time. We'll have to catch the replay since I'll be deep in Schlaftrum's embrace whilst this goes live. I hope you have sweet dreams and you enjoy the replay. As always, I love reading your comments and I make sure to put hearts on every single one. And so yes, thank you for supporting your Magpie in that way. And I hope that next time, I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to go live, but I hope that you are able to be live in the live. So let's see. It says, I probably won't be able to watch the replay till a few days later since my niece is visiting. So I'll be on Tita mode until she goes home later this week. I'm not sure, but I believe it is Tia for Mexicans, right? Yes, so Tia, accent, the little accent mark is on the I. So that's auntie. Yes, I am old enough to be called a tia, I guess. If my sister had a kid, then her kid would call me Tia Magpie, right? However, it's not just limited to Tia, to like biological, you guys. So I go to church and it's very diverse. My church is super diverse. We have Blacks, Hispanics, Asian, and we have a really beautiful community of Filipinos. And one of my duties at my church is to mentor these kids into, well, my role is visual, audio visuals. So at church, I gathered together a whole bunch of kids and taught them how to do editing, taught them how to do video editing, audio editing, producing. So after quite a long stint of mentoring these kids, I earned the title Tita. So they start calling me Tita. So I'm like, well, I'm not really old enough to be Tita, but I'm still, and we're not biologically related, but it's really sweet. So whereas part of me is like, wow, I'm not that old. Like, I accept the title with pride and joy and delight. So yes, power to all the tias and titas, whether you're spiritual or whatever it is. Hope you enjoy your time with your family. Anyway, all that tangent aside, just to say, have a good time with family. Let's see. And yes, it's tia in Mexico or in Spanish. However, we don't. The way I see it is like when you want to address somebody who is like older than you respectfully, but they're not related. I'm feeling like you can also call them tita or tito. You could be very close, but but not necessarily you're like biologically related. But at least in Mexican culture, we don't do that. Like, the only people we would call tío or tía, at least in Mexico or in Latin America, as far as I know, is like your actual uncle or aunt. And then anybody else who is like a close friend, or like somebody that would be like, it would just call them señor, señora, don, doña. At least that's how I grew up. Like anybody with like I wanted to refer to respectfully, it would be like señor or señora. So yeah, there we go. Anyway, so it's such a tangent, you guys. At least all of those Spanish speakers in the house, please verify that I'm speaking truth and it's not just me. But I'm pretty sure I got it right. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for bringing in a nice little tangent for me to go off. Anyway, good night and enjoy your sleep. Let's see. Teal says, early gang. Hey, Teal. Says, I don't have a migraine this time, so I can actually use the chat. Yes! Love it. Welcome, Teal, and happy to see you here. And Red Tempest also says, hi, everybody. I will be able to listen in live this time. Awesome. Happy to see you, Red. And I look forward to reading you guys' comments as we go. Blockshot also says, hello, everybody. Hello. I believe you're from Europe, gang, so it's not too late for you, but it is definitely evening, right? Also, Little Butterfly says hello, and Red Tempest reminds us that today is Mine Day. And yes, I am excited because the last chapters, they were like, was Eglantine? No. It was Grisha point of view, and who else was it? Hannelore and Grisha point of view. So I think I don't know. Yes, I do know whose POV is next. I will not. It just slipped my mouth, you guys. So anyway, hope you enjoy the pre-pub. I know for sure one or maybe two. I think I know whose point of view is coming up. So I hope you enjoy them. They're good. And Kat Asterisk says, hi everyone, me too, I had forgotten so much. It was fun to decipher the foreshadowing the second time around though, right? Like going in the first time, I'm like, she's describing a picture. Like she's literally describing a picture. And I'm like, why do we care? Well, it's because it's all symbolic foreshadowing. Oh my goodness, yeah. So, yeah, and this chapter also has symbolisms as well. So I'll talk about it a little bit too after we're done reading the chapter. Blockshot says, being an aunt hasn't that much to do with age. My aunt was 50 when my older brother was born. Yeah, that's true. I just mean like in the way like you would call aunt, tita, or tito, at least as far as I'm aware in like the Filipino culture. It could be somebody like older than you who's probably not related, but you want to address with like endearment, but also respect, I think. Okay, I'm not an expert, you guys. I'm not. So that's what I meant. Like, usually it's somebody that's much significantly older. At least that's what I think, you guys. Don't quote me because again, I'm Mexican, so this is just what I have experienced. Let's see what else. Red Tempest retracted his message. You have an uncle younger than you. Really? You know what? Families are like that. Families definitely are like that. You know, things sometimes get crazy, you know. I've heard of things that get a little bit interesting when, for example, a dad marries a second time somebody much younger. And so it's weird like that. Like my mom had a stepbrother, no, a half brother. Yeah, my mom had a half brother who was younger than my mom's nephew. So we had the same situation because grandpa married like when he was in his late 60s and a miracle happened. And so the family tree got really interesting. So yeah. Anyway, you guys, I am happy that the discussion is leaning towards the direction of family, you guys. While we're on the topic of family, let's review what we learned about Jane in the previous read-alongs or so. We had Jane sent off a letter to her uncle, whom she told, I'm alive. Auntie Reed was a big fat liar. I am still alive. I am here. If you want to bestow upon me your your monies, I am available, you guys. You guys, what must I do to make myself available to the world to inherit money? The other day I was talking to my sister about maybe buying a lotto ticket or something. I don't know, you guys. Just I don't know. Anyway, so Jane is contacted her uncle. Her uncle's still living. Her uncle, upon realizing that she was gonna be married to a man that was already married, sent off Richard Mason, who along with the solicitor rescued her from in the nick of time from marrying Rochester. Much to Rochester's chagrin, but to our collective relief, Jane and Rochester have like a heartfelt conversation. Rochester was acting really sus, but he does in fact love her. He's just not at the proper. He just can't love her. It's just not the thing is done. You cannot say you love somebody and then try to make him your mistress. You just don't. So Rochester has a long way to go if he wants to earn Jane, but first, Bertha, the insurmountable obstacle, has to be dealt with. Anyway, Jane has now run away from Thornfield, is basically destitute because she gave up all her money to the coachman, who, let's see where he dropped her off. We're now going to see Jane's adventures. Now she is literally without family, connections, a job. Let's see what happens. Yes, let us now continue on. Let's read Jane Eyre. Chapter, is that 28? Yes, that is chapter 20. Chapter 28. 2 days are past. It is a summer evening. The coachman has set me down at a place called Whitcross. He could take me no further for the sum I had given, and I was not possessed of another shilling in the world. The coach is a mile off by this time. I am alone. At this moment I discover that I forgot to take my parcel out of the pocket of the coach where I had placed it for safety. There it remains. There it must remain. And now I am absolutely destitute. Whitcross is no town, not even a hamlet. It is but a stone pillar set up where 4 roads meet. Whitewashed, I suppose, to be more obvious at a distance and in darkness. 4 arms spring from its summit. The nearest town to which these point is, according to the inscription, distant 10 miles, the furthest above 20. From the well-known names of these towns, I learn in what county I have lighted. A North Midlandshire, dusk with moorland, rich with mountain. This I see. There are great moors behind and on each hand of me. There are waves of mountains far beyond that deep valley at my feet. The population here must be thin, and I see no passengers on these roads. They stretch out east, west, north, and south, white, broad, lonely. They are all cut in the moor, and the heather grows deep and wild to their very verge. Yet a chance traveller might pass by, and I wish no eye to see me now. Strangers would wonder what I am doing, lingering here at the signpost, evidently objectless and lost. No, evidently objectless and lost. I might be questioned. I could give no answer but what would sound incredible and excite suspicion. Not a tie holds me to human society at this moment. Not a charm or hope calls me where my fellow creatures are. None that saw me would have a kind thought or a good wish for me. I have no relative but the universal mother, nature. I will seek her breast and ask repose. I struck straight into the heath. I held on to a hollow I saw deeply furrowing the brown moorside. I waded knee-deep in its dark growth. I turned with its turnings, and finding a moss-blackened granite crag in a hidden angle, I sat down under it. High banks of moor were about me. The crag protected my head. The sky was over that. Some time passed before I felt tranquil even here. I had a vague dread that a wild cattle might be near, or that some sportsman or poacher might discover me. If a gust of wind swept the waste, I looked up, fearing it was the rush of a bull. If a plover whistled, I imagined it a man. Finding my apprehensions unfounded, however, and calmed by the deep silence that reigned as evening declined at nightfall, I took confidence. And yet, as yet, I had not thought. I had only listened, watched, dreaded. Now I regained the faculty of reflection. What was I to do? Where to go? Oh, intolerable questions when I could do nothing and go nowhere, when a long way must be yet measured by my weary, trembling limbs before I could reach human habitation, when cold charity must be entreated before I could get a lodging. Reluctant sympathy importuned, almost certain repulse incurred, before my tale could be listened to, or one of my wants relieved. I touched the heath. It was dry, and yet warm with the heat of the summer day. I looked to the sky. It was pure. A kindly star twinkled just above the chasm ridge. The dew fell, but with propitious softness. No breeze whispered. Nature seemed to be benign and good. I thought she loved me, outcast that I was, and I, who from man could anticipate only mistrust, rejection, insult, clung to her with filial fondness. Tonight, at least, I would be her guest, as I was her child. My mother would lodge me without money and without price. I had one morsel of bread yet, the remnant of a roll I had bought in a town we passed through at noon, with a stray penny, my last coin. I saw ripe bilberries gleaming here and there like jet beads in the heath. I gathered a handful and ate them with the bread. My hunger, sharp before, was, if not satisfied, appeased by this hermit's meal. I said my evening prayers at its conclusion, and then chose my couch. Beside the crag, the heath was very deep. When I lay down, my feet were buried in it, rising high on each side. It left only a narrow space for the night air to invade. I folded my shawl double and spread it over me for a coverlet. A low, mossy swell was my pillow. Thus lodged, I was not, at least, at the commencement of the night, cold. My rest might have been blissful enough, only a sad heart broke it. It plained of its gaping wounds and its inward bleeding, its riven cords. It trembled for Mr. Rochester and his doom. It bemoaned him with bitter pity. It demanded him with ceaseless longing, and impotent as a bird with both wings broken, it still quivered its shattered pinions in vain attempts to seek him. Worn out with this torture of thought, I rose to my knees. Night was come, and her planets were risen. A safe, still night, too serene for the companionship of fear. We know that God is everywhere, but certainly we feel his presence most when his works are on the grandest scale spread before us, and it is in the unclouded night sky, where his worlds wheel their silent course, that we read clearest his infinitude, his omnipotence, his omnipresence. I had risen to my knees to pray for Mr. Rochester. Looking up, I, with tear-dimmed eyes, saw the mighty Milky Way. Remembering what it was, what countless systems there swept space like a soft trace of light, I felt the might and strength of God. Sure was I of his efficiency to save what he had made. Convinced I grew that neither earth should perish, nor one of the souls it treasured. I turned my prayer to thanksgiving. The source of life was also the savior of spirits. Mr. Rochester was safe. He was God's, and by God would he be guarded. I again nestled to the breast of the hill, and ere long in sleep forgot sorrow. But next day, want came to me pale and bare. Long after the little birds had left their nests, long after the bees had come in the sweet prime of day to gather the heath honey before the dew was dried, when the long morning shadows were curtailed, and the sun filled earth and sky, I got up and I looked round me. What a still, hot, perfect day! What a golden desert this spreading moor! Everywhere sunshine. I wished I could live in it and on it. I saw a lizard run over the crag. I saw a bee busy among the sweet bilberries. I would fain at the moment have become bee or lizard, that I might have found fitting nutriment, permanent shelter here. But I was a human being and had a human being's wants. I must not linger where there was nothing to supply them. I rose. I looked back at the bed I had left. Hopeless of the future, I wished but this, that my Maker had that night thought good to require my soul of me while I slept, and that this weary frame, absolved by death from further conflict with fate, had now but to decay quietly and mingle in peace with the soil of this wilderness. Life, however, was yet in my possession, with all its requirements and pains and responsibilities. The burden must be carried, the want provided for, the suffering endured, the responsibility fulfilled. I set out. With courage regained, I followed a road which led from the sun, now fervent and high. By no other circumstance had I will to decide my choice. I walked a long time, and when I thought I had nearly done enough, and might conscientiously yield to the fatigue that almost overpowered me, might relax this forced action, and, sitting down on a stone I saw near, submit resistlessly to the apathy that clogged heart and limb, I heard a bell chime, a church bell. I turned in the direction of the sound, and there amongst the romantic hills, whose changes and aspect I had ceased to note an hour ago, I saw a hamlet and a spire. All the valley at my right hand was full of pasture fields and cornfields and wood, and a glittering stream ran zigzag through the varied shades of green and mellowing grain. The sombre woodland, the clear and sunny lea. Recalled by the rumbling of wheels to the road before me, I saw a heavily laden wagon laboring up the hill, and not yet far beyond were two cows and their drover. Human life and human labor were near. I must struggle on, strive to live, and bend to toil like the rest. About 2 o'clock p.m., I entered the village. At the bottom of its one street, there was a little shop with some cakes of bread in the window. I coveted a cake of bread. With that refreshment, I could perhaps regain a degree of energy. Without it, it would be difficult to proceed. The wish to have some strength and some vigor returned to me as soon as I was amongst my fellow beings. I felt it would be degrading to faint with hunger on the causeway of a hamlet. Had I nothing about me I could offer in exchange for one of these rolls? I considered. I had a small silk handkerchief tied round my throat. I had my gloves. I could hardly tell how men and women in extremities of destitution proceeded. I did not know whether either of these articles would be accepted. Probably they would not, but I must try. I entered the shop. A woman was there. Seeing a respectably dressed person, a lady as she supposed, she came forward with civility. How could she serve me? I was seized with shame. My tongue would not utter the request I had prepared. I dared not offer her the half-worn gloves, the creased handkerchief. Besides, I felt it would be absurd. I only begged permission to sit down a moment, as I was tired. Disappointed in the expectation of a customer, she coolly acceded to my request. She pointed to a seat. I sank into it. I felt sorely urged to weep, but conscious of how unseasonable such a manifestation would be, I restrained it. Soon I asked her if there were any dressmakers or plain workwomen in the village. Yes, 2 or 3, quite as many as there was employment for. I reflected. I was driven to the point now. I was brought face to face with necessity. I stood in the position of one without a resource, without a friend, without a coin. I must do something. What? I must apply somewhere. Where? Did she know of any place in the neighborhood where a servant was wanted? Nay, she couldn't say. What was the chief trade in this place? What did most of the people do? Some were farm laborers. A good deal worked at Mr. Olive's needle factory and at the foundry. Did Mr. Oliver employ women? Nay, it was men's work. And what do the women do? I know not, was the answer. Some does one thing and some another. Poor folk mun get on as they can. She seemed to be tired of my questions, and indeed what claim had I to importune her? A neighbor or two came in. My chair was evidently wanted. I took leave. I passed up the street, looking as I went at all the houses to the right hand and to the left, but I could discover no pretext nor see an inducement to enter any. I rambled round the hamlet, going sometimes to a little distance and returning again for an hour or more. Much exhausted and suffering greatly now for want of food, I turned aside into a lane and sat down under the hedge. Ere many minutes had elapsed, I was again on my feet, however, and again searching for something, a resource, or at least an informant. A pretty little house stood at the top of the lane, with a garden before it, exquisitely neat and brilliantly blooming. I stopped at it. What business had I to approach the white door or touch the glittering knocker? In what way could it possibly be the interest of the inhabitants of that dwelling to serve me? Yet I drew near and knocked. A mild-looking, cleanly attired young woman opened the door. In such a voice as might be expected from a hopeless heart and fainting frame, a voice wretchedly low and faltering, I asked if a servant was wanted here. No, said she, we do not keep a servant. Can you tell me where I could get employment of any kind? I continued. I am a stranger, without acquaintance in this place. I want some work, no matter what. But it was not her business to think for me or to seek a place for me. Besides, in her eyes, how doubtful must have appeared my character, position, tale. She shook her head. She was sorry she could give me no information, and the white door closed, while quite gently and civilly, but it shut me out. If she had held it open a little longer, I believe I should have begged a piece of bread, for I was now brought low. I could not bear to return to the sordid village where, besides, no prospect of aid was visible. I should have longed rather to deviate to a wood I saw not far off, which appeared in its thick shade to offer inviting shelter. But I was so sick, so weak, so gnawed with nature's cravings, instinct kept me roaming around abodes where there was a chance of food. Solitude would be no solitude, rest no rest, while the vulture hunger thus sank beak and talons in my side. I drew near houses. I left them and came back again. And again I wandered away, always repelled by the consciousness of having no claim to ask, no right to expect interest in my isolated lot. Meantime, the afternoon advanced, while I thus wandered about like a lost and starving dog. In crossing a field, I saw the church spire before me. I hastened towards it. Near the churchyard, and in the middle of a garden, stood a well-built though small house, which I had no doubt was a parsonage. I remembered that strangers who arrive at a place where they have no friends and who want employment sometimes apply to the clergyman for introduction and aid. It is the clergyman's function to help, at least with advice, those who wish to help themselves. I seemed to have something like a right to seek counsel there. Renewing then my courage and gathering my feeble remains of strength, I pushed on. I reached the house and knocked at the kitchen door. An old woman opened. I asked, was this the parsonage? Yes. Was the clergyman in? No. Would he be in soon? No. He was gone from home. To a distance? Not so far. Happened 3 miles. He had been called away by the sudden death of his father. He was at Marsh End now, and would very likely stay there a fortnight longer. Was there any lady of the house? Nay, there was not but her, and she was housekeeper. And of her, reader, I could not bear to ask the relief for want of which I was sinking. I could not yet beg, and again I crawled away. Once more I took off my handkerchief. Once more I thought of the cakes of bread in the little shop. Oh, but for a crust! For but one mouthful to allay the pang of famine! Instinctively I turned my face again to the village. I found the shop again, and I went in, and though others were there besides the woman, I ventured the request. Would she give me a roll for this handkerchief? She looked at me with evident suspicion. Nay, she never sold stuff in that way. Almost desperate, I asked for half a cake. She again refused. How could she tell where I had got the handkerchief? She said. Would she take my gloves? No, what could she do with them? Reader, it is not pleasant to dwell on these details. Some say there's enjoyment in looking back to painful experience past, but at this day I can scarcely bear to review the times to which I allude. The moral degradation, blent with the physical suffering, formed too distressing a recollection ever to be willingly dwelt on. I blamed none of those who repulsed me. I felt it was what was to be expected, and what could not be helped. An ordinary beggar is frequently an object of suspicion. A well-dressed beggar, inevitably so. To be sure, what I begged was employment, but whose business was it to provide me with employment? Not certainly that of persons who saw me then for the first time and who knew nothing about my character. And as to the woman who would not take my handkerchief in exchange for her bread, why, she was right. If the offer appeared to her sinister, or the exchange unprofitable. Let me condense now. I am sick of the subject. I was a little before dark. I passed a farmhouse, at the open door of which the farmer was sitting, eating his supper of bread and cheese. I stopped and said, Will you give me a piece of bread? For I am very hungry. He cast on me a glance of surprise, but without answering, he cut a thick slice of his loaf and gave it to me. I imagine he did not think I was a beggar, but only an eccentric sort of lady who had taken a fancy to his brown loaf. As soon as I was out of sight of his house, I sat down and ate it. I could not hope to get a lodging under a roof, and sought it in the wood I have before alluded to. But my night was wretched, my rest broken. The ground was damp, the air cold. Besides, intruders passed near me more than once, and I had again and again to change my quarters. No sense of safety or tranquillity befriended me. Toward morning it rained. The whole of the following day was wet. Do not ask me, reader, to give a minute account of that day. As before I sought work, as before I was repulsed, as before I starved. But once did food pass my lips. At the door of a cottage, I saw a little girl about to throw a mess of cold porridge into a pig trough. Will you give me that? I asked. She stared at me. Mother, she exclaimed, there's a woman wants me to give her this porridge. Well, lass, replied a voice within, give it to her if she's a beggar. The pig doesn't want it. The girl emptied the stiffened mould into my hand, and I devoured it ravenously. As the wet twilight deepened, I stopped in a solitary bridle path, which I had been pursuing an hour or more. My strength is quite failing me, I said in a soliloquy. I feel I cannot go much farther. Shall I be an outcast again this night? While the rain descends so, must I lay my head on the cold, drenched ground? I fear I cannot do otherwise, for who will receive me? But it will be very dreadful with this feeling of hunger, faintness, chill, and this sense of desolation, this total prostration of hope. In all likelihood, though, I should die before morning. And why cannot I reconcile myself to the prospect of death? Why do I struggle to retain a valueless life? Because I know or believe Mr. Rochester is living, and then to die of want and cold is a fate to which nature cannot submit passively. Oh, Providence, sustain me a little longer. Aid, direct me. My glazed eye wandered over the dim and misty landscape. I saw I had strayed far from the village. It was quite out of sight. The very cultivation surrounding it had disappeared. I had, by crossways and bypaths, once more drawn near the tract of moorland, and now only a few fields, almost as wild and unproductive as the heath from which they were scarcely reclaimed, lay between me and the dusky hill. Well, I would rather die yonder than in street or in a frequented road, I reflected, and far better than crows and ravens, if any ravens there be in these regions, should pick my flesh from my bones, than that they should be prisoned in a workhouse coffin and moulder in a pauper's grave. To the hill, then, I turned. I reached it. It remained now only to find a hollow where I could lie down and feel, at least, hidden, if not secure. But all the surface of the waste looked level. It showed no variation but of tint. Green, where rush and moss overgrew the marshes. Black, where the dry soil bore only heath. Dark, as it was getting, I could still see these changes, though but as mere alterations of light and shade, for color had faded with the daylight. My eyes still roved over the sullen swell and along the moor edge, vanishing amidst the wildest scenery, when, at one dim point, far in among the marshes and the ridges, a light sprang up. That is an ignis fatuus, was my first thought, and I expected it would soon vanish. It burned on, however, quite steadily, neither receding nor advancing. Is it, then, a bonfire just kindled? I questioned. I watched to see whether it would spread, but no, as it did not diminish, so it did not enlarge. It may be a candle in a house, I then conjectured, but if so, I can never reach it. It is much too far away, and were it within a yard of me, what would it avail? I should but knock at the door to have it shut in my face. And I sank down where I stood, and hid my face against the ground. I lay still a while. The night wind swept over the hill and over me, and died moaning in the distance. The rain fell fast, wetting me afresh to the skin. Could I but have stiffened to the still frost, the friendly numbness of death, it might have pelted on. I should not have felt it, but yet my living flesh shuddered at its chilling influence. I rose ere long. The light was yet there, shining dim but constant through the rain. I tried to walk again. I dragged my exhausted limbs slowly towards it. It led me aslant over the hill, through a wide bog, which would have been impassable in winter, and was as splashy and shaking even now, in the height of summer. Here I fell twice, but as often I rose and rallied my faculties. This light was my forlorn hope. I must gain it. Having crossed the marsh, I saw a trace of white over the moor. I approached it. It was a road or a track. It led straight up to the light, which now beamed from a sort of knoll amidst a clump of trees. First, apparently, from what I could distinguish of the character of their forms and foliage through the gloom. My star vanished as I drew near. Some obstacle had intervened between me and it. I put out my hand to feel the dark mass before me. I discriminated the rough stones of a low wall. Above it, something like palisades, and within, a high and prickly hedge. I groped on. Again a whitish object gleamed before me. There was a gate, a wicket. It moved on its hinges as I touched it. On each side stood a sable bush holly or yew. Entering the gate and passing the shrubs, the silhouette of a house rose to view, black, low, and rather long, but the guiding light shone nowhere. All was obscurity. Would the inmates retire to rest? I feared it must be so. In seeking the door, I turned an angle. There shut out the friendly gleam again from the lozenged panes of a very small latticed window, within a foot of the ground, made still smaller by the growth of ivy or some other creeping plant, whose leaves clustered thick over the portion of the house wall in which it was set. The aperture was so screened and narrow That curtain or shutter had been deemed unnecessary, and when I stooped down and put aside the spray of foliage shooting over it, I could see all within. I could see clearly a room with a sanded floor, clean scoured, a dresser of walnut, with pewter plates ranged in rows, reflecting the redness and radiance of a glowing peat fire. I could see a clock, a white deal table, some chairs. The candle, whose ray had been my beacon, burnt on the table, and by its light an elderly woman, somewhat rough-looking but scrupulously clean, like all about her, was knitting a stocking. I noticed these objects cursory only. In them there was nothing extraordinary. A group of more interested no, a group of more interest appeared near the hearth, sitting still amidst the rosy peace and warmth suffusing it. Two young graceful women, ladies in every point, sat, one in a low rocking chair, the other one on a lower stool. Both wore deep mourning of crape and bombazine, with some garb similarly set off very fair necks and faces. A large old pointed dog rested its massive head on the knee of one girl. In the lap of the other was cushioned a black cat. A strange place was this humble kitchen for such occupants. Who were they? They could not be the daughters of the elderly person at the table, for she looked like a rustic, and they were all delicacy and cultivation. I had nowhere seen such faces as theirs, and yet as I gazed on them, I seemed intimate with every lineament. I cannot call them handsome. They were too pale and grave for the word. As they each bent over a book, they looked thoughtful almost to severity. A stand between them supported a second candle and two great volumes, to which they frequently referred, comparing them, seemingly, with the smaller books they held in their hands, like people consulting a dictionary to aid them in the task of translation. This scene was as silent as if all the figures had been shadows and the firelit apartment a picture. So hushed was it, I could hear the cinders fall from the grate, the clock tick in its obscure corner, and I even fancied I could distinguish the click, click of the woman's knitting needles. When therefore a voice broke the strange stillness at last, it was audible enough to me. "Listen, Diana," said one of the absorbed students. "Franz and old Daniel are together in the night time, and Franz is telling a dream from which he was awakened in terror. Listen." And in a low voice she read something of which not one word was intelligible to me, for it was an unknown tongue, neither French nor Latin. Whether it were Greek or German, I could not tell. "That is strong," she said when she finished. "I relish it." The other girl, who had lifted her head to listen to her sister, repeated, while she gazed at the fire, a line of what had been read. At a later day I knew the language and the book. Therefore I will here quote the line, I will here quote the line. Though when I first heard it, it was only like a stroke on sounding brass to me, conveying no meaning. Yeah, my German is really bad, you guys. I am not even gonna attempt. Wait, what was it? Oh shoot, where was I? Was it 50? Yes, it was 50. Okay. And one stepped forth who, to look upon, was like a starlit night. Yeah. "Good, good!" she exclaimed, while her dark and deep eyes sparkled. "There you have a dim and mighty archangel fitly set before you. The line is worth 100 pages of fustian. I weigh your thoughts in the balance of my wrath, and your deeds with the weight of my fury. I like it." Both were again silent. Is there only country where they talk it that way?" asked the old woman, looking up from her knitting. "Yes, Hannah, a far larger country than England, where they talk in no other way." "Well, for sure case, I shall know how they understand one another, and if either of you went there, you would tell what they could say, I guess." "We could probably tell something of what they said, but not all, for we are not as clever as you think us, Hannah. We don't speak German, and we cannot read it without a dictionary to help us. And what good does it do you? We mean to teach it sometime, or at least the elements, as they say, and then we shall get more money than we do now. Very like. But give over studying. You've done enough for tonight. I think we have. At least I'm tired. Mary, are you not? Mortally. After all, it's tough work fagging away at a language with no master but a lexicon. It is, especially such a language as this crabbed but glorious dish. I wonder when St. John will come home. Surely he will not be long now. It is just 10. Looking at a little gold watch she drew from her girdle. It rains fast, Hannah. Will you have the goodness to look at the fire in the parlor? The woman rose. She opened the door through which I dimly saw a passage. Soon I heard her stir a fire in an inner room. She presently came back. Ah, childer, said she. It very troubles me to go into yon room now. It looks so lonesome with the chair empty and set back in a corner. She wiped her eyes with her apron. The two girls grave before looked sad now. It is Hannah. But he is in a better place, continued Hannah. We shouldn't wish him here again, and then nobody need to have a quieter death nor he had. You say he never mentioned us? Inquired one of the ladies. He hadn't time, Byrne. He was gone in a minute, was your father. He had asked a bit of ailing like the day before, but not to signify. And when Mr. St. John asked if he would like either of you to be sent for, he fair laughed at him. He began again with a bit of heaviness in his head the next day. That is a fortnight since. And he went to sleep and never wakened. He wore a most stark when your brother went into the chamber and found him. Ah, childer, that's the last of the old stock, for ye and Mr. St. John is like of different sort to them. Odds gone. For all your mother wore Mitch your way, and a most as book learned. She wore the picture of ye, Mary. Diana's more like your father. I thought of them so similar, I could not tell where the old servant, for such now I concluded her to be, saw the difference. Both were fair complexioned and slenderly made. Both possessed faces full of distinction and intelligence. One, to be sure, had hair a shade darker than the other, and there was a difference in their style of wearing it. Mary's pale brown locks were parted and braided smooth. Diana's duskier tresses covered her neck with thick curls. The clock struck 10. You'll want your supper, I am sure, observed Hannah, and so will Mr. St. John when he comes in. And she proceeded to prepare the meal. The ladies rose. They seemed about to withdraw to the parlor. Till this moment I had been so intent on watching them, their appearance and conversation had excited in me so keen an interest, I had forgotten my own wretched position. Now it returned to me. More desolate, more desperate than ever, it seemed, from contrast. And how impossible did it appear to touch the inmates of this house with concern on my behalf, to make them believe in the truth of my wants and woes, to induce them to vouchsafe a rest for my wanderings. As I groped out the door and knocked at it hesitantly, I felt the last idea to be a mere chimera. Hannah opened. What do you want? She inquired in a voice of surprise as she surveyed me by the light of the candle she held. May I speak to your mistresses? You had better tell me what you have to say to them. Where do you come from? I am a stranger. What is your business here at this hour? I want a night's shelter in an outhouse or anywhere, and a morsel of bread to eat. Distrust, the very feeling I dreaded, appeared in Hannah's face. I'll give you a piece of bread, she said after a pause, but we can't take in a vagrant to lodge. It isn't likely. Do let me speak to your mistresses. No, not I. What can they do for you? You should not be roving around now. It looks very ill. But where shall I go if you drive me away? What shall I do? Oh, I'll warrant you know where to go and what to do. Mind you don't do wrong, that's all. Here's a penny. Now go. A penny cannot feed me, and I have no strength to go further. Don't shut the door. Oh, for God's sake. I must. The rain is driving in. Tell the young ladies, let me see them. Indeed I will not. You're not what you ought to be, or you wouldn't make such a noise. Move off! But I must die if I am turned away. Not you. I'm feared you have some ill plans agate. That brings you about folks' house at this time of night. If you've any followers, housebreakers or such like anywhere near, you may tell them we're not by ourselves in the house. We have a gentleman, and dogs, and guns. Here, the honest but inflexible servant clapped the door to and bolted it within. This was the climax. A pang of exquisite suffering, a throe of true despair, rent and heaved my heart. Worn out, indeed, I was. Not another step could I stir. I sank on the wet doorstep. I groaned. I wrung my hands. I wept in utter anguish. Oh, this spectre of death! Oh, this last hour approaching in such horror! Alas, this isolation, this banishment from my kind! Not only the only anchor of hope, but the footing of fortitude was gone, at least for the moment. But the last I soon endeavored to regain. I can but die, I said, and I believe in God. Let me try to wait his will in silence. These words I not only thought but uttered, and thrusting back all my misery into my heart, I made an effort to compel it to remain there, dumb and still. All men must die, said a voice quite close at hand, but all are not condemned to meet a lingering and premature doom, such as yours would be if you perished here of want. Who or what speaks? I asked, terrified at the unexpected sound, and incapable now of deriving from any occurrence a hope of aid. A form was near. What form the pitch-dark night and my enfeebled vision prevented me from distinguishing. With a loud knock, the newcomer appealed to the door. Is it you, Mr. St. John? Cried Hannah. Yes, yes, open quickly. Well, how wet and cold you must be, such a night as this is. Come in. Your sisters are quite uneasy about you, and I believe there are bad folks about. There has been a beggar woman. I declare she's not gone yet. Lay down there. Get up for shame. Move off, I say. Hush, Hannah. I have a word to say to the woman. You have done your duty in excluding. Now let me do mine in admitting her. I was near and listened to both you and her. I think this is a peculiar case. I must at least examine into it. Young woman, rise and pass before me into the house. With difficulty, I obeyed him. Presently I stood within that clean, bright kitchen, on the very hearth, trembling, sickening, conscious of an aspect in the last degree ghastly, wild and weather-beaten. The two ladies, their brother, Mr. St. John, the old servant, were all gazing at me. St. John, who is it? I heard one ask. I cannot tell. I found her at the door, was the reply. She does look white, said Hannah. As white as clay or death, was responded. She will fall. Let her sit. And indeed, my head swam. I dropped, but a chair received me. I still possessed my senses, though just now I could not speak. Perhaps a little water would restore her. Hannah, fetch some. But she is worn to nothing. How very thin and how very bloodless. A mere spectre. Is she ill or only famished? Famished, I think. Hannah, is that milk? Give it me and a piece of bread. Diana, I knew her by her long curls, which I saw drooping between me and the fire as she bent over me. Oh, wait, that was Diana. I was reading a St. John. Oh, boy. Where is my highlighting crew when I need them? I probably would benefit in highlighting this. Okay, well, St. John and the sisters are talking there. So imagine that it was, I don't know. I got my voices wrong, you guys. Sorry. Diana, I knew her by the long curls which I saw drooping between me and the fire as she bent over me, broke some bread, dipped it in milk, and put it to my lips. Her face was near mine. I saw there was pity in it, and I felt sympathy in her hurried breathing. In her simple words, too, the same balm-like emotion spoke. Try to eat. Yes, try, repeated Mary gently, and Mary's hands removed my sodden bonnet and lifted my head. I tasted what they offered me, feebly at first, eagerly soon. Not too much at first. Restrain her, said the brother. She has had enough. And he withdrew the cup of milk and the plate of bread. A little more, St. John. Look at the avidity in her eyes. No more at present, sister. Try if she can speak now. Ask her her name. I felt I could speak, and I answered. My name is Jane Eyre. Anxious as ever to avoid discovery, I had before resolved to assume an alias. And where do you live? Where are your friends? I was silent. Can we send for anyone you know? I shook my head. What account can you give of yourself? Somehow, now that I had crossed the threshold of this house, and once was brought face to face with its owners, I felt no longer an outcast, vagrant, and disowned by the wide world. I dared to put off the mendicant to resume my natural manner and character. I began once more to know myself, and when Mr. St. John demanded an account, which at present I was far too weak to render, I said after a brief pause, Sir, I can give you no details tonight. But what then, said he, do you expect me to do for you? Nothing, I replied. My strength sufficed but for short answers. Diana took the word. Do you mean, she asked, that we have now given you what aid you require, and that we may dismiss you to the moor and the rainy night? I looked at her. She had, I thought, a remarkable countenance, instinct both with power and goodness. I took sudden courage. Answering her compassionate gaze with a smile, I said, I will trust you. If I were a masterless and stray dog, I know that you would not turn me from your hearth tonight. As it is, I really have no fear. Do with me and for me as you like, but excuse me from much discourse. My breath is short. I feel a spasm when I speak. Water break, sorry, you guys. All three surveyed me, and all three were silent. Hannah, said Mr. St. John at last, let us sit there present, and ask her no questions. In 10 minutes more, give her the remainder of that milk and bread. Mary and Diana, let us go into the parlor and talk the matter over. They withdrew. Very soon one of the ladies returned. I could not tell which. A kind of pleasant stupor was stealing over me as I sat by the genial fire. In an undertone she gave some directions to Hannah. Along with the servant's aid, I contrived to mount the staircase. My dripping clothes were removed. Soon a warm, dry bed received me. I thanked God, experienced amidst unutterable exhaustion a glow of grateful joy, and slept. End of chapter. So, you guys, what horrors? Oh my gosh, that was several days of just wandering about, destitute, hungry, without a friend, in the inclement weather, begging for food. Oh my gosh, you guys, very, very difficult. And all this when she could have just, have said, yes, Mr. Rochester, I will become your mistress and let us go to the south of France and, live it up there. And sometimes principle, you feel that following matter of principle, following what's right seems like it's more of a punishment. But, I think that because, I don't know, like, the book is very, it deals a lot with spirituality, and Jane is definitely a believer. So the providence that she trusted in to help her get out of, her relationship with Rochester did not abandon her at all in her time of need. So she went through very tough times, and, she had to resort to almost begging. Yeah, to begging literally at the door of people. And unfortunately it's a rough world, and she was met with distrust everywhere she went. Now, see, she was an odd one because, like we said before, being a governess, and she's dressed as a governess with her usual clothes. She's of a station that is not a laborer. So she was not a farmer person. She was not, somebody who, worked with their hands for a living, or like in the merchant business or whatever. She was of a class that's above that, but also beneath, she was part of kind of like gentry, almost like beneath gentry, which are people that don't have to work for their living, and but also above working for your living. So it's like you're in this limbo. You're dressing, you don't look like a beggar. You look like a lady. You are wandering around in the moors. Like, honestly, dude, it was tough. That's, people could not really place her like, oh, if she were a beggar person, fine, let's give her some food and whatever, But no, she was wandering around well dressed. So people were obviously like, what's the deal with this person? Anyway, like Little Butterfly says, yeah, Little Butterfly and Red Tempest says, at least she got some bread from the farmer. Yeah. The farmer who's just like, okay, here, have a piece of my bread, when she asked. And yeah, Little Butterfly says, it's a good thing to give another name. What if someone was looking for her? Yeah. I wonder what Rochester's reaction is to having realized that she was gone. So who knows what's going on in that part of town. So yeah, for now it's good that she assumed another name. But let's just kind of go back to her experience in wandering around without anything to her name. So the first time I read this, I was like, I thought the symbolism kind of like absolutely slipped my mind. It wasn't until later, like the last place that the place where the coach left her was in a place called Whitcross. Like I said before, this book is full of symbolism. So again, the cross left her at the cross, basically at the mercy of her heavenly Father, and that's where she had to go from there. There was nobody but her and the cross, symbolism of, both are a crossways. You have to make it, it's like a choose your own adventure. But again, it's in the middle of it all stood like a white cross, or like just a place kind of symbolism. So we also have society, and we live in a Christian society. At least in this world, in this story, she lived in a Christian society where, the tenets of Christianity and most religions, not just Christianity, they say you have to be pious, but part of piety is being charitable. And I don't know if she encountered much charity from many people, because a lot of times, even us, like, I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to judge. And she herself did not judge people for not giving her food or helping her find a job, or aiding in her distress, because she's like, well, I have to fend for myself. They don't know me, they can't trust me. So a lot of times this is my takeaway, when I, like, personally, a lot of people are like, don't give money to the homeless at the side of the road, like, people should earn their keep. And I'm like, yes, that's true, but you never know a person's story. Also, when, like, they say, like, I don't give money to the homeless at the side of the road because look at how dirty they are, they're gonna use the money to get drunk and stuff like that. So like, if somebody came to my house like this, like, I'm a girl, I'm by myself, I'm not gonna let a stranger in my house. I'm sorry, I just cannot. But what I can do is help where I can, where it's not it's not a danger. So, like, the way I see things is like, you help whenever you can, and whether somebody's gonna use that money to go drinking or to drug themselves, that's not on you, that's on them. Because what if God is using you to, like, be the instrument to answer that person's prayer? You never know. Either way, it's on them what they do with the money. You did your part. So anyway, that's just my thing, because I have been in situations where I desperately needed help, from strangers, and I got it. After, and they probably never knew it, but they became an answer to a prayer, really. So I don't know, what are your thoughts? I don't know, that's my thoughts. Like, I'm not judging if that's not what you do, and again, like, it's really not my place to judge what other people do, because everybody has circumstances, but that's just me. It's sometimes doing the right thing is kind of like, there's a saying that says no good deed goes unpunished. Because again, like, sometimes people do take advantage. They do. That's the reality of this world. So you have to also account for those that wouldn't take advantage and who really desperately need it. Anyway, what am I going to say? So, yeah, thank you, farmer, for giving her some food, and even the little girl. Oh my gosh, you guys, that's also like a biblical scene almost from the prodigal son, where he would in the Bible there's a story of the prodigal son who ended up destitute, and the only job he could get was to care for pigs, and his lot was so wretched that he envied the food that people were throwing at the pigs. So he wanted to eat the pig's food. And here was Jane in the same situation. And she literally ate cold, stiff porridge that was meant for the pigs. And she wolfed it down like an animal. Because they put it in her hands. Oh gosh. Poor Jane. Homelessness in the 1800s? No thanks. Exactly. You either died in the workhouse or died from illness and the weather outside. Like, you really did not want to be homeless in those days. You don't want to be homeless anytime, really, but it was just so harsh back then, especially with so much illness around as well. So yeah, she probably wouldn't have starved to death immediately if St. John hadn't brought her inside the house, but she would have lingered for a long time and suffered. It would have been very slow, very painful. It would just been wretched. So yeah. Jane is crazy. Who would do that in the right mind? Yes. So again, that's what Cat Esther says. Again, Jane took a stand. She it was kind of like out of impulse at the moment. So it was impulsive what she did, born out of the sheer urgency that she lived. So I think the temptation was to stay with Rochester was so strong that she had to immediately just go without a plan. There was no time for planning, because if she did, she would be tempted to stay with him and live with him against her own moral dictates. So again, it's crazy doing that. But again, we have to understand where it came from. Like, she had to do it because otherwise she would have really stayed with him. So yeah, I would not have done that. I would have definitely planned for it a little more, at least not giving up all of my stuff. I don't know, you guys. It's hard to say what one would do in a certain situation, but definitely this is the most difficult. In the choose your own adventure, this is like the adventure I would not choose. I would not go out on my own to give out my money to end up in a place I don't know what, and then forget her bag, her parcel with little crazy butterfly, little crazy butterfly. Sorry. Like little butterfly says. I'm glad. Yes, I also am glad that she found a few people with a heart, and they're angels unaware for sure. Yeah, the St. John's family definitely came in to help her, and oh my goodness. And she did describe the girls in detail for a reason, because she's gonna get to know them a little bit more. But of course, that's for next read along, you guys. I hope you join me then. Let me see. What else? Oh, here's another comment. I personally help when my heart is moved. I let that decide when I help out or not. Yeah, makes sense. That's a good way of doing it. Sometimes, you feel called upon to help at some point. Sometimes there are times when you feel called to help upon a person who doesn't look like they need help. But sometimes there's people who, like, inside they're hiding a need. And sometimes all you have to do is just offer something that something tells you inside to do something for them. And so that's what happened to me, at least a few times. Like, I'm like, I don't know, man, I feel like this person needs like some a little bit of help, and they don't look like they need help, but something is telling me to help, or at least to do something or talk to them or something. I don't know, it just happens. Red Tempest says she needs to contact her uncle. Yes, she does. Or at least to contact the Mr. Briggs. Remember? He told her to like stay in touch. So I don't know, dude. Like, we need her uncle to come here and swoop in to save her and take her to Madeira, which we already saw is a beautiful place. I don't know, man. With this weather and like rain and endless moors, I don't know if I would want to stay in England. I would rather just go to live in a in a paradise in the Atlantic. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go live with Uncle Eyre. All right, you guys. I am happy that you guys joined me today. Bookworm Prepub is in a little under an hour. I hope that you join me for tomorrow on my other channel for the chit chat. And also on the other channel, I am working to release, I hope, a video. So wish me luck. I'm excited for it. So anyway, you guys, I've had lots of fun reading today. I will see you on Wednesday. I'm not sure if it's the afternoon or morning or noon. But yeah, be on the lookout for notifications. If you are subscribed here to the channel, make sure to put the little bell. And if you're not, then do so. I will also put the notification up on my Discord server if you're a member as well. Much thanks to every member who is here joining me from the Discord. I can see who, let's see, some people here. Teal is a member. Thank you for your support. Red Tempest also. Little Butterfly as well. I think, oh, and Patrick. Hey, Patrick. Oh, you just got here. Why did you just get here? Oh, no. Well, Patrick is also a member. So thanks to these fine folks, you guys, I get to spend a little extra time. You know, I set aside extra time from my freelancing drudgery so I could read along these things. So thank you again for all your support. Oh, also, I'm watching you. People is here. She's also a supporter of the channel. So lots of love from me to you guys. We are, let's see, what percentage of the way are we in the book? Let's see. We are at 73%. Cool. 73%, you guys. Fun stuff. We still have plenty of stuff to get going, you guys, and I hope you look forward to it. Let's see what happens now that she has encountered this family. Join me to find out. Until Wednesday, I will see you all, and happy Mind Day to you all as well. Thank you, Teal. Goodbye, everybody. Love ya.